Jason Sullivan of On Subrogation, and in this video, it's our third video in the Emergency Response Liability series. This scenario, we're going to look at fire department liability. In our first two videos, we looked at bystander liability and then alarm company liability. Let's go back to our main scenario. Your insured has a home that burns down. In this situation, the neighbor sees the fire and they call the fire department. And what happens? It takes the fire department 45 minutes to arrive. As this happens, there goes from smoke inside the home, to then flames in a portion of the home, to the entire home being engulfed in flames and then ultimately burning down. You have to pay your insured under their policy of insurance, but what recovery or liability may you have against the fire department? If the nearest fire department is less than 5 minutes away and it takes them 45 minutes to arrive, they could have arrived sooner and they could have stopped that fire from spreading and destroying the total home. Maybe it would have been limited to a particular floor or room or side of the house, but now instead you've had to pay for the complete replacement of that home. With government liability, which most fire departments are, you want to start first with the basics of, could there be any liability? So we have an entire governmental liability video, but we'll do a short recap here. One, you want to see, is subrogation allowed against the government entity? Many states don't allow subrogation claims against government entities. An individual can pursue the government for some negligence and harm that they cause, but insurance companies can't recoup funds from the government. Also, you want to look, is there some kind of protection for the government? Have they waived sovereign immunity for this particular issue or circumstance? If they have, then you want to then make sure that you meet any notice requirements. Frequently, there's a shorter notice requirement that must be done before filing suit. And frequently then, if you provide notice and the claim is denied, there's a different statute of limitations than you may be used to dealing with for ordinary negligence claims against citizens. So, recapping those things, you want to make sure that you have a claim and you meet all the procedural requirements. But then, what sorts of claims then exist against, let's say, a fire department for not coming quickly enough? And you want to look at the dispatch. Did the dispatch take down the wrong address? Did they send the fire department to the wrong location? Did they call a department that was further away from the lost location than maybe another department that could have been there quicker? The fire department's going to have policies and procedures that they need to follow. And if they do any of these things in violation, certainly you may have a claim of negligence against them. You also may have a chance to look at how the firemen and the firefighters responded to the loss. Generally, the fire department's main goal is to put out the fire and stop the spread and prevent it from damaging other parties. So when they decide to use water to put the fire out, or a foam, or they have to break something, or cut a hole in the roof, or break out the windows, generally that's going to be within the reasonable response to the fire and there'd be no negligence for that type of damage. But what if they sprayed the entire house with water and there was no indication that there was actually spread or smoke or any hot spots in that part of the house? If you're dealing with a large house, maybe part of it could have been protected, maybe just had minimal smoke damage, but now it's soaking wet and the fire department has completely destroyed everything in there. Again, you're going to want to know what the policies and procedures are and was there some violation of those. You also may want to get into whether or not the fire department has trainings. Are the people properly trained? Are the people properly hired? If you have any of these cases where it just doesn't feel right with what the fire department did or how long it took them to respond, you may want to look into whether or not there was some violation of their duty, and you're going to look at the standard that's frequently set out in their policies and procedures. For On Subrogation, that's not the long and short of it, because we have a special bonus part here. For this emergency response section, we're going to look at what happens for their liability, but we haven't talked about damages at all. And the question you might think is hanging in the air is, well, if the house is on fire and the bystander didn't start the fire, and the alarm company didn't start the fire, and if the fire department didn't start the fire, there was going to be some damage anyway. That house had some fire, probably smoke damage at some extent, and if the bystander had taken action and they were required to, or the alarm company wasn't negligent and the fire department had gotten there quicker, or the fire department wasn't negligent and got there quicker, Now we're looking at the damages between what would have existed if the fire department, alarm company, or bystander had met their duty, and then what damages were actually sustained. And this can be very difficult to prove because unless you have eyewitnesses to say, I watched that there was no smoke in this part of the house, but there was smoke over here, and it took 5 minutes for the smoke to reach this part, and then another 5 minutes for the smoke to reach this part. And then flames appeared 15 minutes later, and then the flames reached this part 20 minutes later. Now you can begin to possibly put together a case of, here's how much damage existed beforehand and would have existed had there been a timely response. But because there wasn't that timely response, the damages got a lot worse. And proving that can be very difficult for your subrogation cases. So for the emergency response issues, again, you're always looking first, is there liability? But then second to that, you want to be able to prove damages. If we take it out of the emergency response situation, it's a lot like a total loss vehicle. If you're insured rear ends another vehicle, and then another car comes behind them and rear ends them, well, that second vehicle may be liable for your damages. But if your first impact that you're insured was at fault for caused the vehicle to be a total loss, it was just such extensive front end damage that the vehicle was a total loss, well then that damage caused by the second impact, which was the fault of the other vehicle, did it really cause any additional damages? And those are the types of issues that as you pursue these types of cases where there's going to be some damage, and now we're arguing about how exacerbated it was, how much worse it got because of some other party's negligence, there's going to be difficult cases to prove, and you want to make sure that you have some evidence to put that all together. For Rathbone Group and On Subrogation, I'm Jason Sullivan, and that really is the long and short of it.